The sun had already gone down, and the wind was cold that night in the city. Leila Morgan held her little boy Evanes's hand as they stood in line outside a soup kitchen. The air smelled like smoke from old buildings and food from the kitchen. Her coat was too thin to stop the cold that bit her fingers. She rubbed Evan's hands to keep them warm. He looked up at her with tired eyes, but smiled when she smiled at him. He was only 6 years old and already knew that his mother worried about many things. Once Lila had a job at a small grocery store. It did not pay much, but it helped her pay rent and buy food. When the store closed, she lost her job and fell behind on bills. The landlord asked her to leave. She tried to find another job, but there were too many people looking and no one was hiring. With no family nearby, she and Evan stayed in a women's shelter for a few weeks. The other mothers were kind, but space was small, and the nights were long. Leila often told Evan that this was only for now. She said that things would get better soon. But inside, she was scared. She had kept her fears hidden from him, smiling when she wanted to cry. Some days she would skip meals so Evan could eat more. Each morning she fixed his hair with gentle hands and told him that he was brave. The soup kitchen offered them one hot meal a day. It was a place where the smell of food warmed the air and people were treated kindly. Leila had walked there many times, but each time she still felt embarrassed. She had once been the woman who gave a few dollars to people in need, not the one standing in line waiting for help. Yet when she saw other families there, she realized she was not alone. She told herself that asking for help was not shameful, that it was part of surviving. Still, her heart felt heavy. When they got inside, the room was bright and crowded. The sound of people talking mixed with the clatter of dishes. Volunteers moved quickly behind the serving table, ladling soup into bowls and handing out rolls of bread. Lila helped Evan sit down at a long wooden table. His cheeks were pink from the cold, and his eyes had a hopeful light when he saw the steam rising from the food. As Lila looked around, she noticed how each person had a story to tell. There was an older man with worn gloves holding a Bible, a young woman with 2 small children, and a teenager wearing a torn jacket who looked lost but polite. They ate slowly, like they wanted to make every bite last. When Lila reached the front of the line, she saw the man serving soup. His voice was calm when he greeted her. His eyes were kind. The moment they looked at each other, something inside her paused. There was something familiar about his face. She could not place it, but it stirred a memory from years ago, back when life had felt easier and dreams seemed real. She blinked, pushing the thought aside. It had been a long day. Faces could blur together when someone was too tired. He smiled and handed her a bowl. "Here you go. Take care of the little guy there." His tone was gentle. His eyes crinkled when he smiled. Lila nodded and took the food, whispering a small thank you. She returned to the table, watching Evan eat. He dipped the bread into the soup, his lips moving as if he were counting each piece. Lila brushed his hair back and told him to drink the soup while it was warm. For a moment, her heart lifted. Seeing him eat gave her comfort. It made her forget the wind outside, the shelter walls, and the cold street waiting beyond the door. Still, her mind kept going back to the man's voice and face. She told herself she was imagining it. But deep inside, something about him had touched a quiet place in her memory. She reminded herself that she could not think about such things now. She had no time for memories or dreams. There was only today and the hope of making tomorrow a little better. The night grew darker as people finished their meals and left. Lila tucked the blanket tighter around Evan's shoulders and looked around the room again. The man who had handed her the soup was speaking to another volunteer. He looked calm, but beneath his polite smile there seemed to be a trace of sadness, as if he carried stories he did not share. Lila looked away before he noticed her watching. She held Evan close and whispered that they would be fine. As they stepped back into the cold street, snow began to fall in slow, silent flakes. It felt like the night was wrapping the city in quiet hope, a small promise that life might still hold something kind. The next morning was cold again. Lila wrapped Evan's scarf round his neck and walked him to the shelter's small classroom. The shelter offered lessons for the children while parents looked for jobs. Evan liked stories and drawing pictures of houses with gardens. Lila watched him join the other children and smiled. She wished she could give him a real home again. After dropping Evan off, she walked to a nearby street where people pinned job notices on a board. Most of the papers were old. Some phone numbers no longer worked. She picked one paper that offered part-time cleaning at a small office. Her chest lifted with a little hope, but she needed a phone to call, and hers had been cut off weeks ago. She folded the paper and kept it in her pocket. She told herself there would be another way. She had learned to keep walking no matter what. That evening, she went again to the soup kitchen. It was warmer tonight, and the smell of stew reminded her of home. The same man from the night before stood behind the counter, moving with quiet focus. Lila kept her eyes on the bowls as she stepped forward, nervous but curious. He greeted each person with the same kindness. When it was her turn, he met her eyes again. His look was steady, and his voice calm. "Welcome back," he said softly. Lila hesitated for a second. Her heart beat quickly. She nodded and managed a small thank you. She wanted to ask his name but stayed silent. It felt strange to want to know more about a stranger when she had so many problems of her own. The man kept serving for hours without rest, joked lightly with other volunteers, carried boxes, and smiled at children who waited in line. He never raised his voice. When people thanked him, he always said it was nothing. Behind that gentle tone was a quiet strength. Lila noticed how he treated every person with respect, not pity. Some volunteers looked rushed or tired, but he was calm, as if this place mattered deeply to him. After everyone had eaten, the crowd thinned and the room grew quiet. Lila sat at a corner table, waiting for Evan to finish his bread. The man was stacking trays nearby. When their eyes met, she gave him a small smile, and he walked over with a friendly nod. "Your boy looks happy," he said. Lila returned the nod. "He likes the soup. It's nice to see him eat well." He looked down at Evan, who was busy licking his spoon. "That's what matters," he said. "Kids deserve to be warm and full." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Lila studied his face for a second longer, trying to place where she had seen him before. His voice had something familiar that stirred a memory of laughter long ago, of a summer day and a boy with the same eyes. She almost spoke his name, but fear stopped her. What if she was wrong? She forced a smile and said, "We're thankful for what you do." He nodded and replied, "We all do what we can." Lila gathered the courage to ask, "Do you work here full-time?" Shook his head. "I help out when I'm in town. My job lets me move around a lot." That answer made her wonder what kind of work he did. His clothes were simple but clean. There was nothing to show wealth or pride, only calm confidence. Before she could ask more, someone called him to the kitchen, and he excused himself with a polite smile. Evan tugged her sleeve. "Mama, can we help next time too?" Her heart warmed. "Maybe we can," she said. The idea of helping instead of only receiving made her feel stronger. It felt like a small step back toward the woman she once was. That night, after putting Evan to sleep at the shelter, Lila lay awake for a long time. Her thoughts kept returning to the man at the kitchen. She told herself it did not matter, but it did. There was a kindness in him she could not forget. His face followed her into her dreams, where the past mixed with the present. The next afternoon, she came early to help serve before dinner began. One of the older volunteers handed her an apron with a grateful smile. Lila's hand shook a little at first, but soon she found comfort in ladling soup and handing out bread. It felt good to be useful. When she turned to place a tray on the counter, she caught sight of him again. He was organizing boxes in the back room and talking quietly with a man who looked like the kitchen manager. They both seemed serious. Then the manager clapped him on the shoulder, thanking him for something before walking away. Lila wondered what they had talked about, but she didn't ask. Later, when she left after cleaning tables, she saw him outside stacking crates in the cold night air. He looked up when she walked by and gave her a small wave. "See you tomorrow, Lila," he said. Her steps slowed. He remembered her name. She smiled shyly and called back, "Good night." The sound of her name on his lips stirred a strange warmth deep inside her. She turned the corner with Evan's hand in hers, unaware that behind that simple kitchen door was a story waiting to be uncovered, and one that would soon change both their lives. Ethan Cole wiped his hands on a towel as the kitchen lights dimmed for closing. The chatter had faded, replaced by the clinking of spoons and the scrape of chairs. Helping at the soup kitchen always gave him a quiet peace that his business meetings could not. The faces he saw reminded him of both struggle and strength. But tonight One face had stayed in his mind more than the others. Leila Morgan. He had not spoken her name out loud for years. When he saw her step into the line 2 nights ago, holding her young boy's hand, the air had seemed to stop around him. Years between them rushed back in an instant. She had changed, yet he could still see the same bright spark in her eyes. The same kindness that used to light every corner of their small town when they were young. He remembered the sound of her laughter by the lake, the way she wrote her dreams in the margins of her notebooks. It had been a lifetime ago. After high school, Ethan had gone to a nearby city to study business on a scholarship. He had wanted to return after a few years and start a life close to home, but life had pulled him far away. A new job had turned into long travels, then success, then distance. When he came back once for a short visit and found that Leila had moved away, it hurt more than he wanted to admit. He threw himself into work and told himself it was for the best. Now, seeing her again like this, he felt both grateful and guilty. Ethan had started quietly funding the soup kitchen several years earlier through a charity he built in memory of his late mother. She had taught him that kindness was not about saving the world at once, but about helping who you could reach. He had promised himself he would keep her lesson alive. He never told anyone about his full involvement. To the staff and volunteers, he was only a regular helper who showed up often. Keeping his name out of things kept it real for him. But now there was Leila, and the secret felt heavier to hold. He walked to the storage room and leaned against the wall, tired but thoughtful. The manager, Mr. Lane, came in with a smile. "You did good tonight, Ethan," he said. "We fed a record number of people." Ethan nodded. They needed it. The weather keeps getting worse. Mr. Lane sighed. "Lots of families this week. It's getting harder out there. I don't know how we'd stay open without donors." Ethan gave a small nod but said nothing. Did not do it for thanks. He did it because he could, and because he believed that small acts made the world kinder. Yet tonight, he could not stop thinking about one family in particular. When he left the kitchen that evening, he stepped into the cold and saw a few figures walking away under the streetlights. One of them was Leila, holding her son's hand. Ethan watched them for a moment. She looked tired, but kept a steady pace, guiding her boy along the icy sidewalk with care. He watched until they turned the corner and disappeared. That night, he could not sleep. His mind replayed every detail of her face, the quiet strength in her voice when she spoke, the way she smiled even when she had so little. He wanted to reach out to offer her help, but he feared she might reject it. Pride could run deep, and he did not want her to feel small. She had always been proud of building her own path. He understood that. Yet it hurt to think she was struggling now. The next morning, Ethan visited the company office that handled his charity funds. He asked them to start a new program under the kitchen's name, one that could help mothers in need find steady jobs. He told them to make sure one of the first spots went to Leila if she applied. He gave no reason for the request, only that she was capable and deserved the chance. He signed the sheet and left before the woman at the desk could ask questions. Later that day, he returned to the kitchen. Leila was already there helping to set up tables. When he greeted her, she looked surprised, but pleased. He asked if she was settling in as a volunteer. She smiled and said that it helped her feel useful again. Ethan told her quietly, "You're good at it. People notice when you're here." Her cheeks flushed slightly. "Thank you.
Right.
It feels nice to do something again. It keeps me hopeful." Ethan wanted to say more, to tell her how proud he was, but he kept his voice steady. "Hope is important," he said. "It keeps us moving." As the evening went on, they worked side by side, handing out food, washing dishes, and sharing small smiles across the noise of the crowd. It felt natural, like years had not passed at all. Ethan caught himself glancing at her often, seeing in her the same light that had once made him believe anything was possible. When everyone was leaving, Leila thanked him for helping her learn the serving routine. Ethan only smiled and said that everyone started somewhere. Inside, his heart felt heavy and full at the same time. He did not know yet how destiny would unfold between them. But as he watched her walk out into the night with her son, he knew one thing clearly. He was not going to let her fade from his life again. The wind blew harder the next week, and snow covered the sidewalks like a white blanket. The shelter where Leila and Evan stayed was full, and the nights felt colder inside than they looked outside. Lila tried to keep her spirits strong for her son, reading him short stories before bed, pretending everything would soon change. Yet part of her mind was tired. When morning came, she took Evan to the soup kitchen early because the staff needed extra help. The line outside was long. People stamped their feet to stay warm. Lila joined the other volunteers, wrapping bread in napkins and placing spoons on trays. The work warmed her hands even though the room was still chilly. Ethan arrived a little later, carrying boxes of supplies through the back door. His breath came out in white clouds from the cold air. He set the boxes down and began helping quietly. Lila noticed him across the room but tried not to stare. Something about his calm nature gave her comfort. Even when the crowd grew restless, he spoke kindly to everyone. She handed a bowl of soup to a thin man and caught Ethan watching her with a small, thoughtful smile. It made her cheeks heat up. When their eyes met, she looked away quickly and kept serving. There was a strange feeling between them, gentle yet strong, that both were trying not to acknowledge. Later, when the rush was over, Ethan walked past her station and said, "The way you talk to people helps them feel safe." Lila wiped her hands on her apron. "I used to help at a community center years ago," she said. "I liked making people feel seen. Everyone deserves that." He gave a light nod. "It shows. People respond to kindness more than words." She smiled softly. "You speak like someone who understands that well." He almost laughed, but his voice stayed quiet. "Maybe I do." The sound of wind against the window broke the moment. Ethan went back to checking supplies, and Lila returned to cleaning tables. Yet the warmth of that brief exchange lingered. That evening, when the last group of guests left, Lila started folding blankets that were stacked near the door. Ethan came over, holding a navy one in his arms. "There were only a few left," he said. "I saved this one for you and Evan. It's thicker than the others." Lila hesitated, touched by the gesture. "You didn't have to do that." He smiled. "I wanted to.
Ouch.
With how cold it is, everyone needs something warm. Take it for him." She accepted the blanket, her fingers brushing his for a quick second. A flicker of something passed between them that neither could name. She thanked him and looked down, unable to hold his gaze for long. As Lila helped close up for the night, she noticed that some lights in the back office were still on. Ethan was there speaking to the kitchen manager again. His back was turned, and his posture looked serious but calm. She could not hear their words, but the manager's tone suggested gratitude. It made her wonder again why everyone treated Ethan with such quiet respect, as if he meant more to this place than he showed. After leaving, Lila walked home through the snow, Evan asleep against her shoulder under the navy blanket. Each step felt lighter than before. She replayed Ethan's voice in her head and remembered the kindness in his eyes. There was something familiar there, something that reminded her of the teenage boy who once promised to write to her every week after leaving their small town. Yet her heart beat faster, as though it already knew the truth she refused to see. Ethan stayed late that night. After every volunteer had gone, he sat at a table with a cup of weak coffee in his hands. He looked at the empty bowls and chairs lined up in rows. The laughter that had filled the room earlier had faded into silence. He thought about Lila again, about her gentle smile and the way she always put Evan first. He wanted to help her more, to make her life easier. But he did not know how without revealing who he truly was to this place. As snow tapped softly against the windows, he made a quiet choice. The next day, he would visit the local employment office, where several of his programs worked with single mothers. He would check on openings, maybe find a position at the health center for someone with Lila's background. She had once told him during their teenage years that she dreamed of helping people get better, of becoming a nurse someday. He wanted her to have that chance again. He wrote her name on a small pad of paper and smiled to himself. The kitchen lights flickered as he stood to leave. Outside, the city was quiet. Streetlights glowed on the thin white snow, and Ethan pulled his coat tighter as he walked down the empty street. In another part of the city, Lila lay beside her sleeping son, her hands clutching the navy blanket that smelled faintly of kindness and warmth. Neither of them knew how closely their lives were tied yet. For now, it was enough that a small light of hope had started to burn again in both of their hearts. Days began to pass with small but steady changes. Lila kept coming to the soup kitchen every afternoon, not only to eat, but also to help. The other volunteers had started treating her as part of their small team. She swept floors, washed dishes, rearranged tables, and smiled more each day. The work gave her a rhythm again, something certain in a life that had felt unsure for so long. Ethan noticed this change in her too. Every time she walked through the door, the room seemed lighter. He found himself looking forward to those hours, just to hear her voice among the noise of the crowd. She often laughed with the women she worked beside, and that sound made something in him calm down. Reminded him of how much strength lived in simple kindness. One morning he arrived to set up before the rush started and noticed that Lila was already there helping one of the older cooks prepare trays. She wore her hair pulled back and hummed softly as she worked. He stood quietly for a moment, just watching. Then he walked up beside her and handed her a clean towel. "You're early today," he said. She smiled at him. Couldn't sleep. Evan woke up before sunrise. "I thought I might as well come and help out." Ethan laughed lightly. "He must keep you busy." "He does," she said. "But I'm lucky to have him. Keeps me strong when I feel tired." There was a short silence as they stacked bowls together. Then she looked up at him and asked carefully, "How come you spend so much time here? It could be anywhere else." Ethan thought for a moment before answering. "It's helping here reminds me of what really matters. It keeps me grounded." "That's rare," she said softly. "Most people just pass through." "I guess I stayed," he said with a small smile. Lila laughed quietly. "I'm glad you did." The words slipped out before she could stop them, and she turned away quickly to hide her blush. Ethan's smile lingered, but he pretended to focus on a box of vegetables. There were many things he wanted to say, but not yet. That week, the weather grew worse. Snow turned into cold rain. Many new faces arrived at the kitchen seeking food and shelter. Lila worked hard, helping each one. Ethan watched how gently she spoke to older people, and how she always offered a kind word before handing someone a bowl. Her heart guided everything she did. One afternoon, the supervisor called Lila into the small office near the back. She walked in nervously, thinking something had gone wrong. The man smiled at her and motioned for her to sit. "Lila," he said, "one of our community partners is running a short training course for assistant work at the health clinic. They only have a few spots. I think you'd be good for it. Would you like to apply?" Her eyes widened. "Yes, I would, but I don't know if I have the right experience." He shook his head kindly. "They're looking for commitment, not resumes. You show that every day here." Lila left the office carrying the form, her hands trembling with excitement and fear. She filled it out that same evening at the shelter while Evan slept. She did not know who had suggested her name, but she felt grateful. When Ethan heard that she had been chosen for the program a week later, he smiled quietly to himself. He had not told her that he had spoken to the coordinator earlier to make sure she was given a fair chance. He knew she would earn her place by her own hard work. That was what mattered. The next time he saw her, she was glowing with happiness. "Yeah, I got accepted," she said. "It's only part-time, but they'll pay a little and help with training." "That's great," Ethan said, his voice full of genuine pride. "You'll do amazing." Lila's eyes softened. "Thank you. You've helped me more than you know." He wanted to tell her that her strength had been the reason, not his help, but before he found the words, Evan came running toward them with a picture he had drawn. On the paper was a house, a woman, a boy, and beside them a man holding a bowl. Evan held it up proudly. "This is us, Mama," he said. "That's Mr. Ethan giving dinner." Ethan bent down to look at the drawing. Warmth touched his chest. "That's a masterpiece," he said with a grin. Lila smiled, feeling her heart grow lighter. For the first time in months, she could imagine a future that was not shadowed by fear. She was still unsure how everything would work out, but she had hope again. That evening, as Ethan closed up the kitchen, he thought about how strange life could be. He had met her again by chance, yet something deep inside told him it was not chance at all. Watching Lila and Evan walk down the street together, he understood that sometimes the right people returned when the heart was strong enough to meet them. And for the first time in years, Ethan Cole felt that his quiet life of purpose had found a new reason to keep moving forward.